Okay, so Jon IX from A Storm of Swords. The chapter where Jon, under siege from Mance raiders, free folk, is just about to find out what little consolation he can find from the camaraderie, shall we say, of his sworn brothers, only to be quickly reminded that there are also pieces of shit in the Night's Watch. So, welcome, dear listener, to the incoherent ramblings of an insane person online, me. We're reading George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire. And right now, we're about to sink our teeth into Jon IX, or Jon IX in Roman numerals, or indeed Jon the Ninth. But I hear you ask, surely wasn't Jon the Ninth also a pope? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Jon the Ninth was indeed not only the name of a Catholic pope in Rome between 898 and 900 Anno Domini, but also a pope of the Coptic Orthodox Christian Church of Alexandria. So there, from 1320 to 1327. You'll be pleased to know, dear listener. A funny side note, this side of the number 8, we no longer find monarchs, or so it seems. It appears that the kings named John stopped at 8. We don't find kings named John the Ninth upwards, for some reason. Okay, History Corner dealt with. Sorry, I had to do this, but really. Now, let's get into our Jon. Because if you're thinking, Jon IX, Storm of Swords, isn't that the chapter with a turtle? Something to do with a turtle? Well done, you're absolutely right. Mance and company did indeed build a turtle, a wooden turtle, to use it as a ram of sorts, but the men on the wall have their own ASOS up their sleeves. Fear not. Okay, let's proceed in order. And by the way, I hope you have already read this particular chapter, because I'm about to spoil the crap out of it. That's right, but no further than that, yeah? I will make references to past chapters and books in the Song of Ice and Fire saga, but not future ones. In other words, I'll be looking back, but not ahead. I know. There are way more, shall we say, succinct ways of saying that, like how they, like for example, how they say it on the Wheel Weaves podcast. You know, the podcast covering the Wheel of Time. I think it's something like, there are no spoilers past the chapter we're reading, so it's totally safe for first-time readers. Yep, something along those lines. But, yeah, I know. But I'm not nearly as professional as those two. So there you go. Anyway, shall we? Yeah? See, the trouble for the Night's Watch is that it's impossible to sleep. What with all that racket Mance's wildlings are making, chopping down trees, razing down the forest and all that. They're working around the clock to build their war machines or whatever, chop, and Jon can't sleep from atop the wall, because that's where everyone is stationed right now. It takes too long to go up and down the elevator thingy, so they're all on top of the wall. While indeed, what's on the ground floor that really should concern Jon right now, because a power shift has just taken place. So even though Jon thinks the only people holding Castle Black right now are, Sir Winton Stout, you know, the senile Castellan, who is technically in charge with Bowen Marsh gone west on a mission, even though he barely remembers his own name, Sir Winton Stout, not Bowen Marsh. And Maester Aemon, whose brains work perfectly, but he's also like 100 years old, not to mention visually impaired. In fact, those two, Winton and Aemon, they have been around for like a couple of centuries when you add up their ages together. How about that? So the de facto, it's really Jon in charge at Castle Black. It was the blacksmith Donald Noy, until the last Jon chapter, but now that we have lost Donald, Jon is basically the big cheese, the big honcho for now. So it's Owen the Oath. Oh, well, I love these names. Owen the Oath and One Boot. What's the name of the other guy? Owen the Oath, who wakes he wakes Jon up, even though it's not like he was actually sleeping, as I said. Owen the Oath, I was saying, so called because he doesn't appear to be the brightest, even though we'll find out he's got quite a few skills on his resume. He's well versed in stuff. For now, all we know about him is that he's great at carpentry. In future books, we'll find out he plays the violin. So yeah, the Oath, not entirely fair, I feel. Although here he does demonstrate that he's not exactly Mr. Current Affairs, Mr. Owen, because he tells Jon, hey, look, I had a dream, yeah? He tells me he had a dream about being rescued by King Robert Baratheon. Imagine that, a Baratheon king coming to the aid of the Night's Watch. The idea. Okay, I'll shut up about that. But the point being that this Owen guy still hasn't processed the news of Robert's death, and chances are, if anyone reminded him of it, he would still go ahead and forget. So he does share that. Does have that trait in common with Sir Winton Stout. So anyway, tens of thousands of wildlings out there in the woods, not a pretty sight. Busy chopping, burning, getting organized and shit. And shooting arrows at the Night's Watch up there. Did I mention that? Yeah, but they just hit the straw men. Remember those? The wildlings. The wildlings are basically straw manning the Night's Watch. That's what they're doing, because they're hitting the straw sentinels, which you might remember the Sworn Brothers had put together in Jon VII when trying to fortify Castle Black from the impending attack of Stir, the Magner, and his raiders, just as a sort of like a bluff, to make the Night's Watch look better manned than it actually was. But now these straw sentinels have actually got names, and there's even a betting game going on. You basically bet on which straw sentinel will get hit by the most arrows by the end of the day. So you see why it's crucial to tell them apart. That's why they all have names, these guys made of straw. They have monikers. But they've been named after existing sworn brothers, because one is called Othel Yorwick, who was one of the recruiting guys way back when Jon said his vows back in book 1. I mean, recruiting as in recruiting for the builders at the Watch, because he's the chief builder. Then there's a straw sentinel named after Tumberjon, who was one of the scouts taking part in the Great Ranging North. Then there's one named after Wat of Long Lake, who we really don't know anything about. No, but the name that made me go, wait, what? Is actually Dolorous Ed. Because all these straw sentinels have been named after sworn brothers of Castle Black who happen to be away at the moment, not dead, on missions along the wall and whatnot. And one of the straw sentinels is called Dolorous Ed. Dolorous Ed, one of our favorite characters, isn't it? So, but if you happen to be a first-time reader and you're wondering, when did we read that Dolorous Ed left Castle Black? And where did he go? Fear not, we didn't read it. It's not on the page. This is actually the first time we learned that Ed Tollett, that's how the name is actually spelled on his passport. The name, the Black Crow Ed Tollett isn't there at present. We learn it here for the first time. And it's sort of up to us to put the pieces together. I mean, until we get more definite updates, let's work with what we've got. Where is Ed? Fact. When Jon returned to Castle Black, after months spent, with the wildlings up north, partying, getting a Canadian girlfriend, so to speak. Now, okay, but seriously, now, when Jon did return to Castle Black, he had a chat with Donald Noy and Maester Aemon, and that was when he learned that, let me read you the quote, I got it right here. 12 true men made it back from Craster's Keep. True men in that they didn't take part in the mutiny. And those men were Dolorous Ed, Giant, your friend, Jon's friend, the Aurochs, that's Gren. We had the tale from them. So that's what Aemon tells Jon. End quote. Okay, so I should have said. the quote ended some time ago. Also, we know that Sam wasn't one of them because Sam followed a whole different route. That's another story. Anyway, later on, Jon meets Gren and Pip, the other two hobbits. This is like Rivendell reunion. he meets Gren and Pip, the other two hobbits, who confirm the whole thing, and they are a Castle Black, but there's no trace of Dolorous Ed. Where is he? He is not even mentioned in the conversation. So we have to flip back a bit to the point in the same chapter when Jon asks Donal Noy, where is the garrison? And Donal just tells Jon, the garrison everywhere. Wildling Chief Harmadogsaid was seen at Wood's Watch by the pool. Rattleshirt at Long Barrow. The Weeper near Icemark. All along the wall. They're here, they're there, they're climbing near Queen's Gate. They're hacking at the gates of Greyguard. They're massing against Eastwatch. But one glimpse of a black cloak and they're gone. Next day, they're somewhere else. End quote. Which we know is a tactic really designed to spread the watch thin, which is exactly what Bowen Marsh is doing right now, because he's leading the garrison left and right along the wall. So yeah, this is all we have to go on, but we can assume that Dolorous Ed is one of the men Bowen Marsh took with him on his sorties along the wall. So fear not, dear listener. I know you miss Dolorous Ed because he's a fan favorite. It's also one of my favorites because his dark humor. But we may yet see him again. And by the way, we also learned that Bowen Marsh has taken his men as far as the Gorge, which is west of Shadow Tower, west. And he has fought and won a bloody battle at the Bridge of Skulls. Charming name, but at great cost. We don't see that battle. It happened off screen. We'll get some bits and pieces of it when and if these men come back. And so long as we're speaking of missing characters, I hear you ask, where's Ghost? Because you will remember that before ascending the wall, climbing the wall with Stur's group, Jon sent Ghost away with instructions to go to Castle Black somehow, because dire wolves aren't great mountaineers. And this was way back in Jon 3. No, but if you're wondering, hey, did I read a passage where Jon and Ghost are united and now 6 Jon chapters later I've forgotten all about it? No, fear not. Once again, no. We don't know Ghost's whereabouts, nor has Jon been able to Zoom, Skype, Teams call Ghost through, wargame powers. No, Ghost must be miles away, sipping cocktails on a beach, I like to think. Anyway, now that we're all caught up, what is Mance up to? Jon is looking into his spyglass / telescope because it's used to both to spy on the enemy from a distance and stargazing. Maester Aemon used to use that. Used to stargaze when he could still see. But it's called neither spyglass nor telescope. It's called a Myrish lens because it's proudly made in Myr. Do you think that back in Myr they just call it the lens? Be it as it may, thanks to his Myrish lens, Jon is able to see not Mance himself, but Mance's wife, Dalla, remember her? She's heavily pregnant with Mance's baby. Then he sees Tormund, Giant's Bane, munching on a roast goat shank and barking orders. Then he spots Varamir 6 skins, the dude who can warg with 6 different animals. We'll meet him again. And then he spots the turtle. I told you about the turtle. And she shat on a turtle. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Award yourself 5 points if you caught that reference. Anyway, this particular turtle is a ram of sorts, built of wood, shaped like a boat, an upside-down boat. It's got 8 huge wheels, so you can push it around, and it's covered in mammoth hides. Raw and bloody, makes it difficult to set on fire with a flaming, even with a flaming arrow. So it's time for the watch to deploy their own weapons, which consist of barrels, filled with gravel and water, then left to freeze out there overnight. So basically ice and gravel. And Jon checks that everything is in place with Gren. Hey, Gren, everything in place? And Gren is on it, Say no more, Johnny boy. It's all in place as per schedule. But all the while, all Jon can focus on is how Gren, a.k.a. the Aurochs, has changed, grown, into a man. He met a boy in book 1, and now he's talking to a man, even half a foot taller, which gives you an idea of how young Gren must be if he's still growing. I mean, the appendix to this book isn't much help, as it lumps all the sworn brothers together in one paragraph without much of a description or age. So I had to turn to the wiki of Ice and Fire for this one, and we are informed that Gren was 16 years old in a Game of Thrones chapter 19, Jon 3. So there you go. I wonder if George R. R. Martin does that as well, when working on the Winds of Winter, turn to the fan wiki to remind himself of minor character arcs, descriptions. Who am I kidding? Of course George R. R. Martin isn't working on the Winds of Winter. Anyway, before I forget, remember when I said that Bowen Marsh had fought this huge battle west of Shadow Tower? Okay, then, upon hearing the news, this is kind of like a flashback. Upon hearing the news, Jon had made one desperate attempt to get villagers from Moletowners, Moltonians, Molers. Anyway, he had made one last desperate attempt to get those guys to join the Night's Watch at Castle Black, realizing that the garrison wouldn't be back for a while. So he had dispatched Zay to Moletown. Remember Zay, sex worker, helped out with a crossbow on the staircase. It's not a code word for anything. During the Wildling attack, during the Stirs attack from the south, back in Jon 8. Jon 8. Anyway, so Jon had dispatched this Zay to Moletown because she was supposed to, plead with the villagers to come and help man the wall, but she never returned. In fact, Jon had later learned from a scout, some guy called Mully, that Moletown was completely deserted, which really Jon had only himself to blame, because if you remember, when Jon Snow reached Moletown back in Jon 6, he had explicitly warned the populace to evacuate. So they evacuated, eventually. And Zay, a smart gal, must have thought, okay, I'm getting the hell out of here. Can you blame her? But they're all engrossed by this turtle thing right now. Each sworn brother has his own comment to make. Satin, ever the expert on reptilian life, he just goes, doesn't look much like a turtle to me. What with all that fur on top? Not to mention the wheel at the bottom. And then this is where Pip goes, oh, it'd make a great soup. Turtle soup. Yummy. But it's advancing towards the gate, so the situation isn't pretty. Only a handful of sworn brothers on this side, tens of thousands of wildlings on the other, and only that gate to separate them, Once the gate is gone, kaput. So they fire a few shots at it, even flaming arrows, except the bloody thing is fireproof. Literally, it's fireproof because bloody. Because it's bloody. From the mammoth's hide and stuff. Oh, speaking of mammoths, Jon is at least a little bit relieved that the wildlings didn't bring mammoths to crash into the gate, and he figures Mance must have decided they were easy targets, so leave the mammoths out. And in fact, he remembers one specific mammoth that the Night's Watch managed to kill previously, and let me read you the quote here. I got it right here. "The last had been a day and a half in the dying. Its mournful trumpetings terrible to hear." Holy crap, can you imagine? I mean, we will obviously never know how nerve-wracking it must be to have to hear a mammoth dying in slow agony for 36 hours, but I can guess it must be dreadful. Anyway, time to roll down those barrels of ice and gravel. Tip them over and roll them, Gren. That's it. You're the only one who can do that. Those babies weigh a ton each. Actually, can you imagine what kind of a damage a barrel filled with ice can do when you and ice and gravel when you drop it from 700 feet? You know, I don't care how sturdy that turtle is. There's no way it's not going to wreck it. Which it does actually. Not the first barrel on its own, but 2, 3 well-dropped barrels do the trick. 4 actually. There, I found it. There are 8 barrels where there used to be 12, so there. Job well done for the day. And at this point, really, Jon Snow might as well get a bit of a snooze, because honestly, sooner or later, Castle Black will fall. Just a matter of when, not if. But for now, time for a power nap, you know. So he leaves Pip in charge of the wall, much to the surprise of both Pip and Gren. See, because this is the theme, isn't it? The underlying theme in the Song of Ice and Fire, one of many. The younger generations taking up the mantle from the old ones. The latter no longer there to provide advice and stuff. I mean, we saw it on the Iron Throne, because this is now the era of the Children Kings, Joffrey and then Tommen. We saw it with Daenerys, because at first she thought her older brother Viserys was going to be in charge, you know, and nothing would be required of her other than looking the part, basically. But we know how that went. So Daenerys is on her own now and has to take decisions, command armies and shit. And even though they were siblings, there was a huge age gap between Viserys and Daenerys. So yeah, we can practically talk about 2 generations, one generation apart. The younger generations taking the mantle, you know, the baton. It even happened to the Ironborn to a certain extent, now that Balon Greyjoy is gone. I'm talking about Asha Greyjoy here, because we don't really know what Theon is up to. If he's still alive. I mean, we don't know except for what, funnily enough, for what we found out right here at Castle Black, because we know what Gren told Jon. Here, let me read you this. "Your brothers were avenged." This is Gren talking to Jon. "Your brothers were avenged. Bolton's son killed all the Iron Men, and it said he's flayed Theon Greyjoy inch by inch for what he did." But who knows, right? This was in the same chapter, you know, where he meets up, he catches up with the hobbits, Gren and Pip. Anyway, most importantly, this passing the mantle from one generation to the next, most importantly, we saw this with the Starks, you know, this passing of the torch to the new generations, because Ned and Cat are gone. Well, for a book and a half, we had both Cat and King Rob, younger generation, but now these are all gone, and it's now up to the kids to survive out there in this tough world with little or no guidance from parent figures, you know, like in Arya's case, Yoren, Jaqen, Sandor Clegane. With all of Arya's father figures, we've been going from bad to worse. So yeah, no, Arya really is on her own. And don't even get me started with the new quote-unquote father figure in Sansa's life. Nah, who are we kidding? These kids are on their own. Bran is on his own, almost. Rickon, we have no idea where he's at, with Osha somewhere. but I sure hope we'll find out. Anyway, my point is this phenomenon here of the younger generation, taking up the mantle, is also happening here with the Night's Watch. All these kids, look at them. Gren, Pip, Jon, they were all fresh recruits in Book 1. And now, whether they like it or not, they have to assume command. Simply because there's no one else. In Jon's case, his father figures are gone. Benjen, Lord Commander Mormont, Donald Noy. There's just Maester Aemon for as long as he's around. Like, he's around right now. Luckily, he's around right now to slip Jon some of the old, dream wine to help him sleep. And it would be great, wouldn't it? Except that he's awakened, whatever the word is, by 4 men that he's never met before. And they tell him, "Come with us, Jon Snow." See, you should never expect something pleasant when you're away, when 4 men wake you up, calling you by your name, telling you to come with them. It's not like you can say, "Oh, this must be that thing I ordered, that folding the kitchenette." No, nothing of the sort. Of course, at first Jon thinks these are Mance Raiders men. Okay, they've overcome us. They've invaded Castle Black. They're swarmed, and they're arresting me now, or whatever. They're gonna torture me. Then he looks, through his sleepy eyes, takes a better look, and realizes that they're all dressed in black. So they're men of the watch, just not from Castle Black. So they take him to what used to be Lord Commander Mormont's solar. So picture this. There's the aforementioned Sir Winton Stout, asleep by a window seat, predictably. Then there's Maester Aemon standing there by the fire, leaning on his cane. But the big surprise, actually 2 big surprises, are former Master-at-Arms at Castle Black, former and now reinstated Master-at-Arms, I suppose, Sir Alistair Thorne, and Janos Slynt. That's right, because those 2 must have become like super besties forever. Back at Eastwatch, they got matching tattoos back at Eastwatch by the sea, and they've got so much in common. Besides, think about it, like their shared love for Tyrion Lannister. Because I don't know if you remember, but Alistair Thorne traveled all the way to King's Landing with a creepy passenger in his luggage. Thing. That's right, he traveled with Thing. Remember Thing from the Addams Family? Do-do-do-do. A severed hand with a mind of its own. In Alistair Thorne's case, it was the severed hand of a white, other zombie type thing. Othel was his name, wasn't it? And it cannot have been a pleasant trip when you think about it. I mean, think about it, really. You're there, on your way to King's Landing. It takes months. And you're trying to get some sleep at a roadside inn in the middle of nowhere. Stormy night outside. And there's this severed hand that keeps knocking from inside the jar. Imagine that. All the way from Castle Black to King's Landing. Only to be refused admittance by Tyrion, who was acting hand of the king at the time, and Tyrion refused Sir Alistair Thorne admittance because Tyrion never really liked Alistair Thorne, and Alistair's mission was simply to show the hand to the hand of the king, or preferably to the king himself, and just go, you see what sort of weird shit we are up against back at the wall, and natural shit. But nothing. For days and days he was kept waiting. Guess it's just me and you, severed hand. This was Alistair Thorne, Yeah, I guess it's just me and you, severed hand Thing, he would say to his companion every night before turning off the lights. Until one day he went, "Don't worry, Thing, Hand. I feel today might be the right thing, the right day, Remember to look mean and scary, Like we practiced earlier, Hand. Cling, ting, ting. Hand. Ping, ping. Hand! No! Why? Yeah, because the hand had stopped moving. It was dead. I mean, it was dead to begin with, undead, rather. Anyway, you know what I mean. So yeah, it stopped moving. There was no point in, the withered hand stopped completely any movement. At which point, Alistair Thorne, no longer had a case, no longer had Exhibit A. So he sailed back to Eastwatch, but he remained stationed there as a Master-at-Arms at Eastwatch, as it says right here in the appendix of this very book, A Storm of Swords. Until today. He was Master-at-Arms at Eastwatch until today. And as for Jason Slint, did I call it Jason earlier on? Jason Slint, well, we all remember from A Clash of Kings, Tyrion 2, how Tyrion is basically the reason why Janos Slint is here. Because at the Watch, for life, stripped of his possessions, Harrenhal. Just as Slint was on his way to claim his newly acquired possession, Harrenhal Castle, Tyrion just went, no, not so fast, mate. And it didn't actually go down like that, actually, because in a typical George R. R. Martin twist, the whole thing started amicably, with Tyrion whining and dining Slint like best buddies, But then he pulled the rug from under his feet, informing him that, yes, okay, his two younger sons would become squires and the eldest would inherit his title, sufficient lands, but not Harrenhal, because that prized possession was earmarked for other things. And Tywin agreed, because he said he always found the idea of rewarding the Slints with Harrenhal a bit too much. Janos, being an upstart from small folk origins and whatnot. Tyrion, of course, hated Slint's guts, as well as Slint's right-hand man, Alardim. The whole thing tied with that infanticide in a brothel. Long story. So the minute he had enough power and authority, and being Hand of the King was power and authority enough, bang! He had both Slint and Alardim exiled on the wall. There. Because when you're Hand of the King, you don't have to give many explanations. What have I done? What have I done? Where's my due process? I demand to see my lawyer. Nah, mate. I'm Hand of the King. I decided, and that's that. So long. Bye. Okay, these dialogues are not quite verbatim, yeah? Of course, Alardim never even made it to Eastwatch because he was thrown overboard from the Summer's Dream, the ship, by one of the gold cloaks paid by Tyrion. And we certainly don't miss the guy. And these were the very same gold cloaks that Alardim was supposed to be in charge of, had Janos Slint had his way. Life is full of surprises, huh? Anyway, long story short, Janos Slint has remained at Eastwatch by the Sea until today. And if you're wondering why he's been treated with such respect and veneration, wonder no more, dear listener. Because remember that letter Tywin Lannister sent to Bowen Marsh, where he said that King Joffrey was super saddened to hear of Lord Commander Mormont's death, but regretted that he could spare no men just now for the watch. What with so many rebels and usurpers still in the field. Well, in closing, Tywin said, and I quote, "Matters might be quite different once the throne is secure, provided the king has full confidence in the leadership of the watch. And by the way, wink wink, do pass along his grace's fondest regards to his faithful friend and servant, Lord Janos Slint." Okay, see? So that's why the leadership on the watch views Slint as in, oh my god, we'd better be nice to this one. So there you have it. If you were wondering why Alistair Thorne is cool with Jason Slint, occupying the office that used to belong to Lord Commander Mormont, to the point of seeing him comfortably sat on Elsie Mormont's chair. There you go, Lord Slint. let me dust the chair up for you. Ooh, sorry about the mess. Well, the reason is that powerful friends. Yeah, so there. In fact, I wonder if there's even been a letter exchange between Jason and Tywin at some point, you know? Jason asking Tywin, hey, oh, hi, yeah, now that you're Hand of the King again, is it okay if I get discharged from the Night's Watch and maybe have Harrenhal back? And Tywin, you know, just going, nah, mate, you stay right where you are. Be our man on the watch, you know what I mean? Anyway, no, but yeah, what Alistair Thorne actually says when Jon enters the room is, here, let me read you the quote, because I need to get into character. Here's the turncloak now, my lord, Ned Stark's bastard of Winterfell. I love how the actor who plays Alistair Thorne says bastard in the HBO TV series, by the way. You know, Owen Teal. He gives you that kind of bastard. You know what? The kind of like Sean Beam. You know, when he was playing Sharp, the TV series Sharp. He's pre-Fellowship of the Ring, big break. In fact, I think it was even before GoldenEye. If you look online, you'll find a compilation of all the times Sean Beam says bastard on that TV series. Sharp. It's kind of cool. Boy, do I digress today. Anyway, so, yeah, here's the turncloak now, my lord. Ned Stark's bastard of Winterfell. Because Ned Stark is bad enough, but this is his bastard, you know? So they start picking on Jon immediately. He's all like, I'm no turncloak. Oh, well, that remains to be established. You are Eddard Stark's bastard, though, are you not? And Thorne immediately goes, yeah, but his stage name is Lord Snow. Ooh, look at me, I'm Lord Snow. Which I think is a bit unfair, considering that it's precisely Alistair Thorne who came up with that moniker, nickname type thing. See, this is another great piece of writing by George R. R. Martin. You know, the kind of frustrating dialogue that makes readers scream from wanting to give Jon some prompts, you know, things to say while he's being attacked. Kind of like in Tyrion's so-called trial. And in both cases, we are frustrated because the character we're rooting for is being attacked and can't defend himself. Tyrion can't defend himself because he's not even allowed to speak in his own trial unless spoken to, remember? And Jon is not, shall we say, articulate enough, you know, young, inexperienced, compared to Thorne and Slint, anyway. In fact, all he can think of right now is, oh, good, these must be the men sent by good old Cotter Pike at Eastwatch. Clearly, they know we're understaffed, so yeah, this can only be good news, right? See, for example, Janos Slint here wastes no time attacking Jon. Here, let me read you the quote. You've been charged with oath-breaking, cowardice, and desertion, Jon Snow. Do you deny that you abandoned your brothers to die on the fist of the first men and joined the wildling Mance Rayder, the self-styled king beyond the wall? And there's so much Jon could respond with, but all he can say is, abandoned? Interestingly, Slint says the sworn brothers died at the feast. But no one in the room right now knows from what they died. Because if you remember, Samuel Tarly never got the chance to attach those second messages to the Raven's feet. The messages explaining that they were under attack from the others, capital O. So basically what everyone thinks is that the Night's Watch at the Feast of the First Men were under attack from the wildlings. Even Jon, because he left the feast with Corin Halfhand to scout the Skirling Pass way before the others attacked. As Jon indeed proceeds to explain. And Maester Aemon, right now, Maester Aemon is the only person on Jon's side. He just goes, listen, mate, we heard all the story before, all right? When Jon arrived, he was debriefed by Donald Noy and myself, and we heard the whole thing, and we're satisfied with it. Yeah, well, this is Janus. Janus says, oh, yeah, well, I'm not satisfied. Thank you very much. I'm not satisfied, and I'll hear the story all over again. All right. So John tries and explain as best he can, that Corin needed a peek into Mance Raider's strategies, and to check whether he had the legendary Horn of Winter, aka the Horn of Jeroboam. Wait, no, that's not the name. Jeroboam is the size of a champagne bottle. Joramum. That's it. The Horn of Joramum. Anyway, it's this magical horn that's supposed to bring down the wall if blown properly. Bring down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. Anyway, so at which point Alistair Thorne smirks because he apparently hearing about this horn of winter, no? Because he apparently doesn't believe in these legends, but makes a mistake here. He makes a mistake because John totally owns him. It totally pawns the crap out of him by going, "Hey mate, listen, you might not believe in those legends, but I don't know if you've noticed, but there's still dead bodies of giants down there by the gate, and I bet you didn't believe in giants until yesterday, huh?" This is probably a good time to inform you that these lines are slightly paraphrased. Or have I said that already? Okay, all right. No, but as I said, this is a skillfully written dialogue designed to be frustrating because Thorne doesn't even acknowledge doesn't even acknowledge to be owned, kind of like, oh, whoopsie daisy, you got me there. No, instead it's that scumbag Janos Slint who intervenes. He goes, "You will address Sir Alistair Thorne as Sir, because he's an anointed knight. All right, and you're the son of that traitor. You're that bastard, son of that traitor Ned Stark. So there. As for me, it's Lord Jason Slint, Lord of Harrenhal to you, rather. And also, I'm in charge here until Bowen Marsh returns." Okay, for first-time readers, actually, this is the big reveal because this is when we find out who is this jowly man sitting at Lord Commander Mormont's desk. This is the first time we find out it's Janos Slint. Anyway, a couple of points to address. It's funny that Janos Slint mentions Eddard Stark here, considering that he himself betrayed Ned with those 100 gold cloaks in the throne room, back in book 1, Eddard 14. I got it written down here, and I don't remember it by heart. And of course, Janos Slint likes to tell himself that he didn't so much betray Ned Stark as he did his duty to the crown he was sworn to protect, But really, that's because history is written by the winners. Another one of George R. R. Martin's themes, But the way things went down really is explained in that famous dialogue between Tyrion and Janos in the Tyrion 2 in Clash of Kings, where Slint was all like, "Yeah, that Ned Stark, traitor. Ha! Do you know he tried to buy me?" But Tyrion was unimpressed at that point. He just went, "Yeah, well, little did he know, right? Little did he know that you had already been bought by someone else, am I right?" That someone else being Lord Baelish, aka Littlefinger, who ironically happens to be the current official owner of Harrenhal Castle. There. So no, Lord Janos Slint, you're not the proprietor of Harrenhal. Lord my ass. Except that John doesn't know any of that. In fact, it's Janos Slint who doubles down. "And what's this I hear about you sleeping with a wildling girl? You broke your vows then, huh?" Which again is an unfair jab, considering that half the Night's Watch regularly visits the brothel. Well, used to visit the brothel in Molestown when Molestown was still an inhabited town. But John doesn't say that either. He just goes, "Hey, Corin said, join the wildlings, eat, sleep, copulate with them if you must. act like them, and learn all there is to know about them. Bada bing, bada boom. But hey, uh, keep this in mind. As soon as I had a chance, I escaped Stir the Magner. I came here and I warned all my sworn brothers of their attack and fought alongside them. The rest is history. But Slint has got an ace up his sleeve, so he has another prisoner brought in, like in those courtroom dramas. And this prisoner, okay, you know it's Rattleshirt because you've read this chapter already. Rattleshirt, you can tell he's been the victim of, shall we say, enhanced interrogation. He's a sallow, battered man, fettered hand and feet, and his face is all swollen and mottled with bruises. And most of his front teeth have been knocked out. Ouch, see what I mean? So he's brought in the room, and Rattleskirt admits to everything. Yeah. This is the Black Crow who surrendered to us. Yeah. I'll admit to anything, you say. Then Corin Halfand said, no way. And then this dude here went ahead and killed Corin. Yeah, I saw the whole thing. See, it's not looking good for Jon right now. And Janus is all like, yeah, I suppose this Corin Halfand also ordered you to kill him? Which, funnily enough, is exactly what he did. I mean, not in so many words. He sort of went like, you joining the wildlings over my dead body. Wink, wink. And then they fought, and then he let Jon kill him. Meanwhile, is it just me to find it funny that Janus is acting all like, I must see that justice is served here at the Watch, as if he'd been there forever, when in fact he's never even met any of those people he keeps talking about in his interrogations. In this interrogation, Corin, never met him. Bowen Marsh, he might have met in one of Bowen's sorties. But Lord Commander Mormont, he wasn't even aware of his existence. In fact, he used to get him mixed up with his sister. Reread that dialogue from the last time we saw Janus in that dialogue with Tyrion. And Slint, of course, doesn't believe a word Jon is telling him. This is in a typical Ice and Fire sort of a style. The jury has already made up their minds, even before the trial begins. He's decided, I'm not going to believe, I'm not going to believe a word this bastard is telling us. And he's using a lot of vegetable, rich figures of speech. Like he goes, do you think I fell off a turnip wagon onto my head? Huh? Answer me, boy. Do you think my head is stuffed with cabbage? Do you think I have Brussels sprouts for brains? Yeah, he's got loads of those. Vegetable rich sort of metaphors, and Jon just owns him again. He goes, oh, I don't know what your brains are full of, sir. I never examined the contents of your head. And punctual as ever, every time Jon has a sassy, snappy reply for Slint, Alistair Thorne interjects. This time he goes on a full tinfoil hat conspiracy theory rant. He goes, yeah, I bet they're all in it together, these Starks, While Eddard was moving against King Robert's son in King's Landing, Benjen and Jon were coordinating on the finer plots up north, with Jon liaising between his uncle Benjen and who is no doubt sipping cocktails in Mance Raider's tent as we speak, and the mutineers at Craster's Keep. Yeah, it's all tied in together, man. It's all connected, man. He did the whole thing from a distance. These days and this day and age, the guy can warg. So yeah, I'm telling you, man, wake up. So, see, first they tried to place Jon at the Fist of the First Men when Mormont's men were under attack, and now they're placing him in the middle of Craster's Keep mutiny, even though they know full well that Jon was in neither of those places during those times. Nor does it help when Jon shows his burn hand, the famous burn hand he keeps flexing, the result of saving Elsie Mormont from a white. In fact, it's the religious faction now that has to meddle at some point for whatever random reason. Septon Celador, drunk as a fish, wakes up from from his stupor, just long enough to let us know, as if anyone had actually asked him anything. That Jon didn't even say his vows properly, swearing by the seven gods. No, he swore, he just said his vows all the way out there, by the bizarre weirwood tree, to swear by the ancient gods, his father gods, who also happen to be the gods of the wildlings. So there. And at this point, Aemon has had just enough of this crap. Because he has the strongest defense for Jon we have seen so far, and the longest line of dialogue, actually. So, dear listener, I simply have to read it verbatim. I cannot give it credit if I just, paraphrase it. So here it goes. They are the gods of the north, Septon. My lords, when Donald Noy was slain, it was this young man Jon Snow who took the wall and held it against all the fury of the north. He has proved himself valiant, loyal, and resourceful. Were it not for him, you would have found Mance Rayder sitting here when you arrived, Lord Slint. You are doing him a great wrong. Jon Snow was Lord Mormont's own steward and squire. He was chosen for that duty because the Lord Commander saw much promise in him. As do I. Yeah! Aemon Targaryen. Standing ovation is what I'm saying. But as you can imagine, none of that really registers with Janos Slynt, who just goes, whatever, take him away. I'll tell you what, Jon, your father was highborn, so he died by the sword, but in your case, a noose will serve. More than enough. Which seems to be the way capital sentences are carried out in the capital. Although, that was how Robb Stark dealt with Rickard Karstark, true enough. But I think that's the way every capital punishment is carried out in the North. Because think about the opening of Book 1, A Game of Thrones. That's the first scene, Eddard Stark carrying out the sentence himself, swinging the sword, chopping off the guy's head whose name escapes me now, which incidentally was the very first idea to pop in George R.R. Martin's head. Every subsequent idea for the Song of Ice and Fire was attached to it, like in a daisy chain. George R.R. Martin pulled the thread and up the Song of Fire came. But the very first kernel was that. Eddard Stark chopping off the head of this Night's Watch deserter that we see at the beginning of Book 1. Anyway, the chapter ends with Janos Slynt ordering his Eastwatch men to schlep Jon in a nice cell, which, by the way, how cold do you suppose a nice cell is? Because that's where they store food. Anyway, dear listener, we have reached the end of this chapter with Alistair doing a bit more licking, going all like, an ice cell, oh sure, what an excellent and most wise idea, my lord, if I may be so bold. And then he grabs Jon by the arm, but the latter does something that we have been wanting him to do for the longest time. It's kind of like a Jack Nicholson versus Nurse Ratched moment, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because he finally grabs Alistair Thorne by the throat. He's way past caring at this point and begins to strangle him. I do not condone violence, by the way, but yeah. And of course, why do I not condone it? Because of course, just like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's a counterproductive move, because as satisfying as it may feel there and then, because the Eastwatch men pull Jon away and Slynt is given the opportunity to say more Slynt stuff like, you see, what did I tell you? Ha ha, what more evidence do we need? He's a wildling through and through, yak, 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 take him away, and so on and so forth. So there. He speaks like that. Okay, so there you have it. So this is George. What am I saying? John. John 9 from A Storm of Swords, chapter 69, if I'm not mistaken. If you made it this far, wow, I'm impressed at your patient and attention span. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. See you at Tyrion's trial. Ciao.